Hey man, Dr. Greg Popchak here. This is episode 44 of the Beatitudes podcast. I want to talk about raising kids with character. And this was the subject of our CatholicHOM podcast this week as well. If you'd like more information from both the mom and dad's perspective, I encourage you to check that out. But I want to talk about our role as dads, especially in light of the Beatitude, blessed are the dads who are peacemakers. You know, in the Beatitudes book, 8 Ways to be an Awesome Dad, I talk a lot about how the Beatitudes are a blueprint for being fathers after our Heavenly Father's own heart. And being a peacemaker, I discuss in that chapter in the Beatitudes, means working to restore right order. That's what peace is. Peace is not just keeping a lid on things or keeping things quiet. Peace, St. Augustine said, is the tranquility that results from right order. As Catholic dads, cultivating right order means raising kids with character, cultivating virtuous kids. How do we raise kids to be godly, healthy, holy people? Now, when we hear the word virtue, a lot of times we think of some kind of Vatican-approved list of specific qualities that we have to be, teaching our kids to. That's overthinking it. A virtue, well, virtue in general, comes from the Latin word virtuous, which means strength. And so a virtue is any quality that allows us to be strong or to lead healthy, holy, good lives. So any quality you can think of that helps you lead a well-rounded, healthy, holy, compassionate life is a virtue. Responsibility, courage, joy, creativity, humor, self-control, you name it. Whether it's on some official approved list of virtues or not, if it helps you be a healthier, holier, more well-rounded, balanced person, it's a virtue. And so our job as Catholic dads is to facilitate peace and be peacemakers by helping our kids cultivate or witness to the virtues that enable them to lead a rightly ordered life. And so a lot of times as dads, we didn't necessarily have great models for what it means to be a peacemaker. We either had dads who ruled with an iron fist and what they said was law, and if we didn't listen, there was going to be hell to pay, or we had dads who were checked out and who wanted to be our buddy, or were just absent in some way, literally or figuratively. And so getting this right is hard. It's hard for anybody. But I want to invite and challenge all of us watching this podcast to really use some simple strategies that enable you to be the head of the house in the sense of being that first servant of Christ who is able to bear witness to the virtues that lead to a healthy, holy life, and call out in our kids the virtues that let them lead a healthy, holy life as well. So, the first thing we want to do as dads is point out virtue when we see it. Not just commenting on our kids' behavior when it's bad, but really focusing primarily on calling out behavior that is virtuous. Not just good, but virtuous. Hey, you know what? That was really responsible of you. You know what? I know you wanted to interrupt me, but I really appreciate how patient you were in waiting till I was done talking to mom to bring that up. Thank you so much for your patience. You know what? I know you wanted to go first, but you really showed a lot of self-control in letting your brother go ahead of you. I'm really proud of you. It was really generous of you to give your sister that last piece of dessert or whatever it is. You're pointing out the good behavior, and the reason for that, and that you're labeling it with specific virtue labels. And again, don't overthink this. It's any strength or quality is a virtue. So label those things so that your kids have a behavioral definition of what those virtues are. That leads to the second thing, which is that once we've pointed out those virtues, that they are capable of doing that spontaneously, then when they forget to do that, we don't have to lecture them or yell at them. We can say, hey, you're usually more patient than this, or I know that you can be more patient than this, or I know that you can be more responsible. I've seen you do it. I know that you can be more generous. I know that you can be more compassionate. I know that you can be more fill in the virtue here because I've seen you do it. And I've pointed it out to you. What would it look like for you to be that fill in the blank virtue here? So we help our kids realize, one, that they've got those virtues in them and they've displayed them before. And secondly, that means that they're capable of being people who can display those virtues in this particular situation now. And that's really important because we want to help our kids think through and problem solve how to be a virtuous person, even when we're not breathing down their necks. See, because a lot of times when dads adopt that disciplinarian role of, not in the sense that I mean disciplinarian, but in the sense of, this heavy-handed kind of, I'm going to come down on you because wait till your father gets home kind of approach. When we do that, we prevent our kids from learning to develop a moral conscience because we're the conscience for them. They don't have to think through how to behave because we're always going to be there to tell them or to yell at them if they don't get it right. But when we ask these kinds of questions, okay, you know what? I've seen you be more, fill in the virtue here. What would it look like to use that virtue in this situation? We're challenging them to think through and problem solve so that they can be virtuous people even when we're not there to correct them or to punish them for getting it wrong. So by taking this approach where we're first labeling the virtues and then reminding them that they're capable of it and asking them how to apply that here, that's teaching them to think and to have a moral conscience. Thirdly, we want to make sure that we're asking ourselves what virtues need to be displayed in the situation. And even calling that out, I really needed to be more patient here, or I really need to be more, I need to really attend more to what you're saying to me instead of just looking at my phone. I'm sorry. Pointing those things out and showing our kids that we're using that same process and thinking through our behavior. Another principle of discipleship discipline, which is, of course, rooted in St. John Bosco's preventive system, is that we don't just see this as something we're doing to our children. We see this as something we're living ourselves, right? So discipline then becomes the process by which we teach our children to be adults by looking to us as an example. That doesn't really have to be perfect. It means that when we mess up, we're able to say, I didn't really have more self-control there. I shouldn't have lost it like that. I really needed to be more patient. I really needed to be more compassionate. I needed to be more loving, whatever. Calling myself out when I fail to display those virtues, or talking about the virtue that I'm working on. This week I'm really going to be under a lot of pressure at work, and but I'm going to really work hard to be peaceful. I'm going to really work hard to try to keep that peace about me in whatever I do. I'm talking to my kids about the discipleship journey that I'm on, so that they see that they need to be thinking about that as well. Another tip in cultivating virtue is prayer. Again, St. John Bosco said that the three pillars of his preventive system were reason, religion, and loving kindness. The religion piece of that was really about prayer. So when we go to our kids to correct them, the first step, of course, is to empathize with them. We need to say, look, you're really struggling here. I can see how upset you are. I can see how frustrated you are. I can see how sad you are. I can see how confused you are, whatever it is. I validate the feeling that they've got, and I want to help you with that, right? So now that I've empathized with them, now let's take a second to ask God to help us with this. Lord, just help my son know what virtues need to be played out here and know how to display them in this situation. Or, Lord, my daughter's really struggling to be generous right now. Help us to figure out what that would mean in this situation. Okay, let's talk about it now. So we're using that prayer. We're teaching our kids to turn to the Lord when their resources have run low. We're teaching them to ask for God's grace so that they know how to build on the nature, that fallen nature that we all have, and display that virtue in spite of themselves, right? So when we are struggling, we want to ask God for that help, and we want to teach our kids to do that too by our witness. Ideally, when we've done this enough and we have taught our kids to really pray for those virtues, we can ask our kids to pray for us. If I'm having a hard day, I can ask my kids to come over and say, I really want to be a more joyful person today and play with you guys, but it's been a really hard day and I'm having a hard time getting to that place. Would you guys pray over me? Lord, please help Daddy be happier today. Please help him to be more joyful and help him to feel better. That's a beautiful thing. And, it's hard not to be inspired by that. I mean, we did that with our kids when they were growing up, and, our kids could really see the power that their prayers had to change our hearts, because it's impossible for your heart to not melt when your child is praying over you and asking God to help you be more of the dad that God wants you to be. And it really makes you feel like, you're doing something right. And that we need that shot in the arm every once in a while. So prayer and incorporating that kind of prayer into our discipline. The last piece of this that I want to put out there is the steps of teaching virtue. So when our kids mess up, a lot of times, again, we want to just tell them what they did was wrong, or tell them what they should have done instead. And sometimes, that's fine. But for the most part, that is actually preventing them from developing their own moral conscience, because we're being their conscience for them, as I talked about earlier. Anytime we give our kid the answer, just right out of the boat, right out of the gate, excuse me, we're actually impeding their ability to start thinking through things themselves. Sometimes they need our help. Sometimes it's fine every once in a while to give them the answers. That's not the issue. I don't want anybody to be overly, rigid about this. But more often than not, we want to help them think through things. And here are the steps. There are two main ways that we correct bad behavior. The first one is a time in, and the second is a time out. Time in is the preferred approach, where we bring the child to us and we are affectionate with them. We help them calm down. We talk through the process of what it means to behave better in that situation. Time out is when we try to do that, but our kid is just too wound up and is resisting our attempts to help them. They're pushing back. They're arguing with us. They're fighting with us. They're being obstinate. And in that case, they need time by themselves. They're not able to accept our help, so they have to go be by themselves until they are able to accept our help. And then we'll follow up with a time in. Either way, the steps that I take a time in or time out through, there are 5 of them, and here they are. Number 1, I need to help my kid calm down enough to be able to tell me what they did wrong, to at least be able to say, this is why I'm being called out. Secondly, they need to be able to give you a sincere apology. And people always ask, well, how do I know if it's sincere? You know if it's sincere, right? Sorry isn't sincere. It's not saying the magic word. It's, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. You're also not necessarily looking for tears and, rending of garments and wearing sackcloth and ashes. It's enough for a sincere, I'm really sorry. Right? Thirdly, they either need to be able to tell you or work with you to figure out what they could have done instead. Now, be careful here. It's not just I shouldn't have said that or I shouldn't have done that. It's how should I have expressed my frustration? How should I have told you that I was, I didn't know how to do what you asked me to do and still get my project done or finish this level on my game or do this other thing? How could I have expressed my intention or my need in a better way? That's what we're trying to teach the kid to do, not just not engage in the bad behavior or say the, frustrating thing, right? So we either the child tells us what they could have done differently to express that intention or need, or they're willing to work with us. Step 4 is where we rehearse it with them. We role play it. Now, every parent wants to skip over this because they think it's going to take forever. If you don't do this, you're going to be repeating yourself 10,000 times and your child will never learn what you have to say. Until you've helped your kid actually do the thing that they need to do, it's not getting into their muscle memory. And it needs to get into their muscle memory. So you role play the other person that the kid was having a hard time with, whether it was their brother or their sister, or their mom, their teacher, whoever. And you role play that to make sure that they've got the words, they've got the posture, they've got the tone, they've got the presence that they need to have to pull this off better next time. All right. So you're not just going through, oh, I should have said sorry, or I should have said please, or I should have, show me. What's that going to look like? Please, can I have a turn? All right. You got the right words, but your attitude was all off. Try it again. You want to keep doing it until you can see that they actually get it right. It's like riding a bicycle. Right? You don't want to just say, okay, get on the bike. Oh, now you know how to sit on the bike so you can ride it. Never mind, go have fun. It's you're teaching them how to do the thing under your watchful eye so that you know that they can do it when you're not watching them. Now, and then the final step here, and it's optional, but it's more often than not a good thing. It's what do they need to do to repair the relationship? And that's step 5. And this doesn't have to be a big thing. It could just be give the person a hug. It could be say, I'm sorry. It could be do a chore for them or let them pick the game next time. But when we hurt somebody with our actions, we need to do something to repair the relationship. So walking them through this step is teaching them again to have a moral conscience, to think through problems the way they need to avoid giving offense in the first place, or correct their offenses willingly and gladly and effectively when they do mess up. We use these 5 steps with time in, if the child is willing to sit with us and work with us, or with time out as a way of getting them to sit with us and work through this with us once they've calmed down. So the time out is where we send them to a separate place where they can be alone until they're calm enough to walk through these steps with us. So the time out leads to the time in. Either way, you're walking through these 5 steps before the child is able to move on with their life. Until then, everything else stops. This is how we teach things, right? We don't teach things by just yelling at the kid or giving them consequences for getting the problem wrong. We help them, we teach them virtue and raise kids with character by walking them through the steps that enable them to think through things on their own eventually so that they can live rightly ordered lives. This is an important part of being a peacemaker as a dad, living at beatitude that says, blessed are the dads who are peacemakers, who, as St. Augustine said, enable our whole family, especially our kids, to experience the tranquility that comes from leading a rightly ordered life. If you've got questions, go ahead and post them in the CatholicHOM Questions and Coaching Forum. Love to continue the conversation there. If you're not a member of the Catholic Home community, and that's CatholicHOM, by the way, stands for Catholic Households on Mission, download the app today and become part of the community. We love having great Catholic dads on the app and having those conversations that come out from really trying to apply these concepts in your own life and family. So check it out. Hope to see you there.